Okay, let's start. Welcome to all of you. My name is Henk-Jan Dalewijk. I'm a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. I'm the treasurer of the IPA at the moment, an officer next to Virginia Unger, who's the president, and Sergio Nick, who is the vice president. And you know, in this time of crisis, we wondered, how can the IPA be useful to our members? How can we try to offer at least some support in these very difficult times? Well, that did lead to these webinars. These webinars are usually in English, but also in other languages. The technical limit of these webinars is around 1,000 participants, but there are many more registrants. All do get the recording of this webinar online after the webinar. For financial reasons, we did not use expensive external firms for the technical part of the webinars. That support is coming from our staff, and we are very grateful for them, and they are very experienced. The topic of today's webinar is the pandemic, because the pandemic is forcing us to work in a different way, a way we are not used to, at least not all of us. It has a great impact, and that impact is very different from therapist to therapist and from patient to patient. So this webinar is about questions like, what do those changes do to us? What do we, did we, how do we, did we handle them, those changes? How pleased or displeased are we with our own approach? And what can we say about our clinical experience so far? Well, 3 well-known colleagues prepared papers on this subject and will present them today. That's Jayne Greenberg from the United States, Roberto Levy from Latin America, and Gertrude Schlesinger-Kipp from Europe. They're all very experienced clinicians with a long history and much appreciation in the psychoanalytic world. About the format of this webinar. First, we start with the 3 panelists. There are 3 presentations of maximum 10 minutes. The second part is for the reactions from the panelists on each other's presentations. The third part is for the questions and answers. About those questions and answers, you should look at the box called questions on the right side of your screen. The box questions. Write your question in that box and post it at any time during the webinar. Please be aware that the questions will be answered only after the presentations. Well, let's stay then with the first presentation. Jayne Greenberg, some of you might know him, or most of you know him. He's a well-known colleague working at the William Allison White Institute in New York. He has edited many books and other publications and is very experienced in publishing as editors of different magazines in the past. Please, Jay, start.
Well, thank you, Hank. And I would like to thank the IPA organizers for having me here today. I think these opportunities to discuss these amazing times with colleagues from other parts of the world is a tremendous gift that that IPA can give us. When I was first invited to participate in this paper, I had 2 very powerful reactions. The first was that there was so much to say. How could I get it into the framework of 10 minutes of talking about what my experience was? My life has changed so much, my work has changed so much, the conditions of my meeting my patients have changed so much. There's just too much to say. My next thought, which was equally powerful and came immediately, is that I have nothing to say. And that I have nothing to say because every way that I've thought of myself as a psychoanalyst has changed so dramatically. I'm used to thinking of myself as somebody whose work is to help people make meaning, either to find the meaning in terms of my own way of understanding people, or to at least be a guide to helping people to explore the meanings that they attribute to their own experience and their own lives. And that function has been profoundly compromised by the conditions that I'm trying to understand and trying to work with, both in my own life and for my patients, with my patients. So I feel that in a lot of ways, I've lost my bearings. I don't have the roadmaps that I'm used to. I don't have the sense of my own place that I'm used to. And I'm reminded that while we analysts have always prided ourselves on what we call our negative capability, negative capability is a state of mind that anticipates some working out of it, some finding of what's going to happen next, and a way of understanding what's going to happen next and what is happening now in light of what happens next. And at the moment, I don't feel that I have any sense of what the future holds for me, for my patients, even for psychoanalysis as a profession. So it leaves me without my usual tools for thinking about things or talking about things. And yet, like all of us, I keep working. I keep working with my patients. I keep working with myself. So what I'm going to be doing mostly today is sharing impressions that come out of this experience, and I'm going to share them without theorizing them, because I can't theorize them. I think anything that we learn about what all this means, we're going to learn après coup. So I'll tell you some of the experiences and some of the impressions that I've had. When I first left my office, which was March 18th, and started working remotely, the first thing that I felt a need to do was to locate my patients, to locate myself, and to help my patients locate me, both physically and psychologically. I felt that so much had been lost in terms of the stability of the contact that I had with people, that there was some pressure to help them to locate me, and also to alleviate their concerns about myself, my health, where was I, mostly how was I. I found at the beginning of the time that many patients began the sessions by saying, "How are you?" And that was a question that I had to hear very differently than I would have heard it in normal times. I mean, in normal times, of course, I would wonder about some deeper meaning of it, but I felt with all of my patients really that it was a question that I had to answer, and that I had to answer very straightforwardly and concretely. People were worried about how I was. I'm older than most, or at least many of my patients. I'm more vulnerable than most, if not many of my patients, to react to that question in any other than a straightforward way seemed to me to be responding to the idea that certainly touched me, that the question itself challenged my own aspirations to immortality. I would like to think of myself as invulnerable to the virus, but of course I'm not, and in fact I'm more vulnerable than many of my patients are. So the question, how are you, I took initially, it's changed. I won't have time to talk about how it's changed, but it first seemed to me to be a very important way of establishing or holding the frame as much as possible. Moving on from that, when I thought about what I wanted to say, I thought very quickly about what I thought of as two paradoxes about the times that we're living in with COVID. The first was that on the one hand, there's a sense of shared experience between us and our patients and shared trauma. And on the other hand, there's a sense of a heightened inequality, not just in analytic dyads, but that runs throughout the world. I'll be talking about that in a moment. When I talk about the shared trauma, I mean that there's, of course, a great deal of shared anxiety about health and safety, the health and safety of people we love. Beyond that, there's the uncertainty about what, not just what life has become, but what it's going to become as we move forward. When will I be back in my office? What will it be like to be back in my office? Will I want to go back to my office? Will my patients want to come to my office? On a larger scale, will psychoanalysis be the same? How will it change? What will what we learn and how we experienced it change? So my patients and I are immersed in that experience, and it is a shared experience of uncertainty and challenge. On the other hand, as soon as I think about how different my circumstances are from my patients and also for many people in the world. I'm actually living a fairly good life during the pandemic. I'm in a place that I love very much and that I'm very happy to be in, where I feel safe and comfortable. And I'm with people I love very much. And so I'm not alone. That creates a real difference between how I am experiencing the pandemic and the way many of my patients experience the pandemic. And it's worth mentioning in this context that pandemics generally heighten the inequality that exists in the world. They affect the privileged much differently than they do the most of the people who are alive today. I came across something that in a book I was reading that I want to share with you because it speaks to that issue. And it seems like it was written last month. I'll read you the brief quote. The person's describing different reactions to an earlier pandemic. Some people, pursuing what was possibly the safer alternative, callously maintained that there was no better or more efficacious remedy against the plague than to run away from it. Swayed by this argument and sparing no thought for anyone but themselves, large numbers of men and women abandoned their city, their homes, their relatives, their estates, and their belongings and headed for the countryside. Well, that's exactly what I did. And that was written in the middle of the 14th century by Boccaccio in the Decameron to describe the reaction to the plague in Florence. And the inequality that plagues, in the ways in which plagues affect people, lasts today. So on the one hand, there's the shared experience. On the other hand, there's the heightened sense of inequality, all of which goes into my countertransference and my way of engaging with my patients and my way of being with them in ways that I certainly have no guideposts for understanding. I see that I'm out of time, so I will I'll stop there. There are a lot of other issues, of course, that will come up in the discussion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jay. There is indeed time to go into those items later on, so let's do that. Second presentation, Rogero Levy. As you see, well, yes, there it is. There you have the sheet on your, you see there, Rogero has a hell of a lot of credentials. He has done a lot in the IPA, outside the IPA, in his professorship, etc. You can easily read that because it's written down there. I'm not going to read it aloud because that's taking too much time. Please, Rogero, start.
Thank you, Hank. Yeah. Thank you all. First of all, I want to thank the invitation to be here with Jay, with Gertrude, with Hank Jan, so distinguished colleagues. And also, I wanted to stress the importance of this kind of activities nowadays, because more than ever, we need to listen one to the other and to learn one with each other, because all of us, we are confronted with the unknown, with the uncertainty mentioned by Jay, and having to work in an absolutely unusual way for the majority of us. And all of us we are learning how to proceed in this new and disturbing reality. So it's important to share our impressions and our thinking at this moment. Perhaps only with the equivalence in the periods of wars, psychoanalysis is proving itself and having to adapt to new conditions to survive as a therapeutic resource. We are observing that new forms of assistance and interventions are being developed, from institutional assistance provided by almost all the psychoanalytic associations, almost in Latin America, but I think that all over the world also, to important variations in our usual setting. I will refer to the last ones that I have been experiencing directly and trying to learn how to proceed on that. I have the sensation that we are changing the tire with the car in motion. So it's a very hard and difficult situation. The rupture of beliefs and expectations caused by the pandemic, the sudden losses that all of us will have, the multiple mournings, generates a collective turbulence that necessarily invades the analytical scene. The real invades with an excess potentially traumatic for all of us. This excess can lead to symbolic transformations in the sense of building of a new meaning of all these facts, or simply this excess will be an enormous amount of unsymbolized emotions, therefore traumatic, that will be splitted or evacuated. And it's interesting that there is already some statistics of a lot of post-traumatic stress, for example, in Hubei after the pandemic. I think that the major change in our clinic is a certain symmetry at this moment, already mentioned by Jay, because us and the patients, we are affected by the same reality, perhaps the same feelings of fears, of uncertainty, helplessness, etc. Especially in my country, in Brazil, where in addition to poverty, and we know that the virus is more cruel with the poor populations, we don't have a reliable federal government to manage this health crisis. On the opposite, each week we have a new political crisis that change the attention from the health crisis to the political one. The other significant symmetrization that happened at this moment is that not only the patients need us, but we need them. We need them not only from the financial point of view, but especially we need to remain as analysts. And as Winnicott said, there is no mother without a baby, so there is no analyst without patient. And we need the patients to exist as psychoanalysts, not to fall into the helplessness and in the sense of annihilation of the feeling of non-existence. And we are living at this moment where several boundaries are moving violently. The walls of our consulting rooms, as Janine Pouget said, pulse, and the reality invades with all its force our consulting room. The boundaries between real and imaginary moves also. And the differentiation between us and patients is also blurred at this moment, as Jay already said. And if the frame was what we had of relatively fixed, the invariant of the process, the frame where the canvas analysis was painted, now the frame is in motion also, taking us to an unstable space that we still do not know very well how to manage. Of course, each of one, patients and analysts, will live this excessive, invasive, and disturbing reality in the light of their or our internal world. But we will have to make an extra effort of mentalization and discrimination to differentiate our anxieties and fears from those of our patients. We will have to work in a space where the real is recognized with its threats and ruptures and articulated with its resonances in the internal world, and vice versa, with the resonances of the internal symbolizing function on the interpretation of real. We will have to work, as Yolanda Campbell said, in the edge, at the same time in what happened in the session and in reality, in us and in the patients. All of this become very complex, and as we are not involved in the usual analytical situation with its projective vectors, but we are part of the same real as our patients. I am convinced that the tiredness mentioned by most of colleagues refers, of course, to the excess of stimuli that remote analysis mediated by equipment promotes, but it's also due, in my point of view, to the enormous work of representation and discrimination to which we are subjected. But we know that in face of a potential traumatic situation, it's essential to be present, in quotes, emotionally. The fundamental anthropological situation described by Laplanche is made up of at least two human beings present, or as Bion said, to make one, two are needed, and how this presence can occur in remote analysis. I want to say that even if the face-to-face analytical situation works as a particle accelerator that reproduces and intensifies the fundamental anthropological situation, it's possible already, at least in my experience, to observe that in remote analysis, that when there is a solid link between the subject of the analysis, it can occur intense analytic field experiences such as dream of transference and of countertransference. This potentially traumatic situation upsets the analytical frame, but I think that with the effort that all of us are doing, it's possible to save the analytical space. First, I think that the determinant is trying to maintain the analyst's internal setting, his receptivity, his listening to the unmanifest, his capacity for metaphorization, his capacity for containment, and capacity for symbolic transformation, etc. I think this is not easy and requires a lot of effort from all of us. And I think also that it's necessary to try. I am in time, Hank-Jan?
Yes, you are a little bit, but please.
Okay, so I will finish with this last item, please.
Very good.
But I think that we have to try to maintain the fundamental roles of psychoanalysis. The free association, the non-omission, the constant time, duration, and space, in quotes, of our sessions. But I think that afterwards in the discussion, we will have more items and ideas to share and to discuss among us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rogero. Very well done. Well, the third presentation, Gertrude from Germany. She has been very active, always on the clinical material, and she has always been on the administrative level. She has been on many IPA committees and also on the IPA board. Please, Gertrude, start.
Yes, thank you very much, Hank-Jan, and to invite me. And I want to begin with Jay's sentence, "How are you out there?" So, I mean, it's, I regret very much that I cannot see you and not hear you, but we try it like this. I will begin with two dreams. The first dream, a woman about 60 dreams. My mother phoned me and told me that my father died some days ago. You know, I have a very near and loving relationship to my father. I cried, when was it? When did he die? Because it seemed to me the cruelest thing that I could not be with him, and I did not know exactly when it was. But my mother did not listen to me. She talked and talked and did not listen and did not answer. End of dream. Before Corona times, I would have spoken maybe with the dreamer about her relation to her father and mother, about her unconscious wishes, about how she maybe could not reach me, the mother analyst, and how the mother analyst seems not willing to answer to the most existential questions. But now in these times, we all have, as you said, Jay and Rogero, we all have this fear to lose a loved one without being there and without helping. What should I say? Maybe we are all woven into the same existential anxieties. Second dream. A 70-year-old man dreams that he was queuing. We don't queue in Germany normally, only now in the pandemic. So he was queuing, many people before him, and there was a hole in the earth and a deep, deep tunnel. He saw guards who said that they should jump into the tunnel. All humans before him jumped in the hole. When he was the next in line, he said, "I'm not jumping." He refused to do it. The waiter said, "You must jump." He woke up in horror. So this man was on the verge of depression in these Corona times because his daughter's family withdrew the children, and he could not visit the grandchildren by his own because of the lockdown. The most terrible thing for him was the insecurity all in his life, to not control the situation or to live after his own ideas. So these insecure times bring back the early anxieties, not to control the parents, not to be with them, to be alone, in all of us. Many colleagues I talked to said that they have so much trouble to contain the uncertainty and the fears of the patients for the unknown and the danger of the other, and also the danger for the other. They have fear of future poverty, children failure at schools, and also our analysts and candidates have these anxieties. As my colleague said, on the other hand, we have the same danger, we analysts, and this changes the transference, countertransference situation a lot. For our patients, it contain also our anxieties. Some of them know very good what we need, and they ask, how, as Jay said, how are you? And they have a lot of fears to damage us, because we are the older ones, and I call this Oedipal reversal, because I have a lot of younger patients who want to have video sessions with me because they fear to infect me. The other way around, that they can infect them, is never told. I think it's very interesting. The question is, can we embrace this Oedipal term? Can we accept that we are not demigods, as we call it in Germany, demigods in white, or we are everyday clothes, but a risk group, weak, older human beings who need the protection of the young ones? And I'm very impressed how the young people can really embrace this form of protection. So to gender, I am in the Kovat. This is a committee of women and psychoanalysis of the IPA in the Kovat group of Germany. We asked ourselves if there are gender differences in the corona crisis. I think it's much too early to answer this question, but there are already a lot of studies who say that the women have to carry the whole burden and raising the children and home office immediately. According to these studies, women experience a multiple lose situation, a lose-lose-lose situation. They earn less, they are unemployed faster, and they have to do more nursing care work at home. And it is assumed that the domestic violence is increasing, twice as much emergency calls in helping centers as before. Some claim that 30 years of emancipation are in vain. I have young patients who are a little bit in a better situation, but the women stayed at home immediately, the men going to work. But I also noticed that these women liked it very much. So the clinical approach, as my colleague said, we know too little. The crisis changes our practice and theory. We may not be able to keep our standards in training and also in our own practice. And therefore, I think it's very important to speak to the candidates, how they are experiencing this crisis and how they can have their degrees and so on. I think it's crucial. And also the international contact is crucial. In the dream examples in the beginning, I wanted to show, like my colleagues, how important it is to turn to the outer reality as well as the inner reality. Many analysts think that the inner world and the inner truth of the analysis should count only. But my psychoanalytical attitude was always that we come from the external reality to the inner reality, and that we have in mind the past and my past, his or her present and mine, and his or her future, and also my future as analyst, even in the analytical hour. I want to to say that the other side of the free association is what Freud called equal attention. I mean, it's not a very good translation for gleichschwebende Aufmerksamkeit, but I don't know a better one. This German word makes it very difficult or makes it very clear what we have to do in the session. And I ask myself, how can we succeed in this pandemic to establish our own equal association or attention for what the patient is telling? How can we maintain this analytical attitude, and should we even do so? We have this analytical method which comes so near to the other, I think nearer than every other therapeutic technique. And even sometimes we feel infected by the other symbolically, or we infect the other also. How can we keep it apart, the transference and countertransference and the real events? It's very complicated. And I want to say some words about the society, because the uncanny thing, I think, in our society and world is that the split is increasing, that the non-knowing is becoming more threatening again. The foreigner, the refugee, the climate change, and even now the danger of the coronavirus, the effects that are stirred by this, they are denied and shifted to the other and fought in the other. The uncanny aspects of world reaches into our unconscious. And the uncanny is then sometimes shifted into something like conspiracy theories that deny the power of the virus. At least in Germany, we have this, and I think also in other countries very much. Conspiracy mentality could, in my view, be seen as a regression in mentalization. But we could also quote, not Boccaccio, but also very long ago in the 50s of last century, Hannah Arendt, who wrote, I want to quote this. She wrote, "The leitmotif of these constructions, like conspiracy theories, no matter in what guise they appeared, was to expose the officially known history as a facade and to reveal a sphere of secret influences that uses visible history to fool the world." I think this is very much what's happened nowadays. The presentness of us analysts, it's also not a very good translation from Gegenwärtigkeit, presentness. I don't know if this word exists. As I understand it, is to make a dialogue between this non-knowing and also with what we could know about scientists and virologists, and to demask this conspiracy mentality. And I want to end. I read that there was sometimes, it's reported at least, an eerie denial among psychoanalysts in London during World War II, not noticing or not seeming to notice that an air raid was taking place while they were sitting there and discussing. I think this situation today is not comparable to World War II, but the global pandemic is plunging many into war, poverty, death, loss, despair, fear, and hunger. I read yesterday that 10 million children worldwide are threatened of starvation from the corona after effects. And I think this cannot still be denied and is another traumatic factor, as Ruggiero told. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gertrude. Well, let's start the part in which the three of you can react on what the other two have said so far. Who of the three of you will start?
I'm happy to. I was particularly caught up with Gertrude's idea that we're not demigods, and that the pandemic is driving that home to us in many ways. It also, I think, in a lot of ways, dovetails with what Rogero said as well. That there is a way in which we're reminded, certainly, of our physical vulnerability, but I think more important, or as important, is that it reminds us that we are no longer what Lacan called the subject supposed to know, because we don't know, and we don't know. We don't have a sense of what the trajectory of our work is at this point. I think that as time goes on, and I'm interested in other people's reaction to this, that I have a sense that I'm starting to find myself in the work, so that the question, how are you, has a different meaning now than it had to me when I first left my office. And I'm able to think about it and conceptualize it differently. I don't know that I'm able yet to work with it differently, but I am able to think about it differently, and to start to have a more curiosity about it than I did at the beginning. But certainly we are we're no longer demigods in the sense of really having a firm conviction that we understand either the world or the psychoanalytic situation in the way that we did a couple of months ago. And that influences our countertransference profoundly, and our participation.
Very good. Rogero, yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, I like it very much, Jay and Gertrude presentations, and I think that it's a stimuli really to go forward thinking on all of that. And me too, Jay. I think that in this period of, I think, 8 or 9 weeks, little by little, we are trying to find ourselves in this new ambience. And I had an experience with a patient at the beginning that I was trying to make analysis in this new situation. But I still, and I think that all of us, we was very struck by the reality, and my patient said to me that she was missing her analyst, and I was with her, but she was missing her analyst. And so I realized that at that moment I couldn't do analysis with her. But I think that in these few weeks, I think that we little by little we are elaborating this situation, and perhaps perhaps could being more analysts that at the beginning. And this sentence, this question that you begin, Jay, how are you? It's very strong, because the experience that we are having at this moment is when, for example, I had to cancel a session immediately. This provoked a lot of anguish that I was ill and I lost my health, and I was with the corona. And also, if you cough at a moment in a session, immediately this emerge an anxiety in the field that the analysis and the analyst is sick. So really, Gertrude, I think that you are right, that this floating attention necessary to make analysis at this moment is very hard to reach. It's very hard to reach because our mind all the moment is invaded and is infected by these troubles and preoccupations that come from reality.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I myself, I am doing live video and telephone sessions. And I think it's a very big difference between all the three media and the to be exhausted, like Rogero said, it's the question between every session: where am I? Who is coming? In which media? Have I to put on my computer or my headphone or whatever? And I think this is very important, that we have to get used to this and to calm down a little bit, because it's really very exhausting. And on the other hand, I can feel the differences. For example, on the telephone, it's very direct because it's in your head, the other voice, and I also saw that I am more confronting on the telephone and more supporting the patient. And when I realized this, I asked, how is it for you that I'm so confronting or that I am so supporting? And they say, oh, it's good, it's good, go on. And so this, as Jay said, you learn a lot what maybe you did not before. And but what is I gain something in my technique also if I'm doing all these three media. But we have to learn a lot, and I think we can learn a lot from the young people, from the candidates, because they are much more used to these media than we are.
I wanted to say something about Rogero's patient who said that she was missing her analyst. I've had similar kinds of experiences with a few patients. And one of the things that I found very interesting and surprising about working this way is that many patients find themselves missing things that they didn't know that they had. And that what patients are missing sort of reveals, opens a door on aspects of the relationship of the field that had been, as I've come to think of it, collusively disavowed, that both the analyst and the patient have disavowed certain aspects of their connection, that when that connection has changed so dramatically, the patients are able to find. So I've found that with a few patients, it has opened up aspects of the transference, countertransference that have sort of dragged along without being noticed over many years.
Any other reflections?
The issue of the medias, Gertrude, I think it's very interesting, and I think that each one of us and of our patients, we are choosing the better way to be in contact. For example, there is colleagues that prefer, as Jay said, only by telephone, only with the voice. There is colleagues and patients that prefer to have the image of both participants of the analytical scene. And I, in general, with the patients of analysis, I propose, and my patients in general accept, to have to suppress my image and to maintain only the image of the patient and the audio. And I ask the patients to be in a reserved place where they can free associate at the maximum they can. But I felt principally at the beginning of the lockdown or the isolation, that I paid much more attention to reality, and was very difficult to maintain the free-floating attention. And I was much more supporting and much more attentive to concrete situations. And another thing that it's very strong in this experience is what Jay said or wrote in his paper about the paradox between intimacy and absence and distance, because it's very shocking and disturbing, because with some patients, suddenly we are inside their homes or inside their rooms, or they are inside our house. So there is all this paradox to be closer, but at the same time distant physically and only having contact by electronic medias. So this is really a new paradox that we are living.
Yes, I didn't have time to discuss, to get to that when I was speaking today, but I find that paradox extremely interesting, and also that it creates a lot of countertransference in my experience. That I'm in my patients' homes, they're in my home. Sometimes they've asked questions about where I am. I felt more need than I usually do, again, in the service of locating myself, to tell them something. And so we are really together, but we are at least literally disembodied. But I should say I only do phone sessions, although in some cases I've offered but discouraged doing video, partly because of the technological challenge. Video always seems more mediated to me than phone, but also because, and maybe blocking out the images you do, Ruggiero, helps with this, but I find that the phone contributes to my own sense of privacy, and it allows me to think, or to go off into a reverie without being watched in the process of it. But what's more intimate than having somebody right in your ear and perhaps in your bedroom as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, kind of finishing this part, an additional question. All of you are talking about support. As analysts, you are drawn into a position of more support than usual, which is understandable. I think everyone is doing that. And remarkable, the patients are also supporting us with the questions of how do you do, etc. Then the next question is, do we support each other sufficiently? Do we find ways to do so? And then, for instance, and that's the basic question, is the IPA supporting the members in these cases sufficiently? How can we find ways to do so? If you have opinions, please say so. Yes, please, Gertrude.
I had the feeling that the IPA is very much supporting. We got informations and letters and mails with very good supporting words, warm words, and because it's very important, because I have the fear that also the IPA is in danger, because in many countries, also the psychoanalytic societies maybe are not able to pay the dues anymore, and so on. And we are trying to plan for Vancouver, but if I ask, the colleagues don't know if they will be able to come to Vancouver because of financial problems, also because of maybe another wave of virus, but mainly also because of the financial situation. And I think I fear this very much, and I think it's very important to have a good connection to each other. And I know many other colleagues I learned to know in the last years in India, in China, in South America, who are really in a very bad situation now. Much like Jay said, we are quite privileged all the time to, although it's very difficult for us. Also in Brazil, of course, I can imagine, Roger, that it's very difficult. And I think the IPA did something until now, and we should support us again, each other. This is very important.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. I have the same opinion from Gertrude. I think that the IPA is making a very good job of supporting us, of doing a lot of webinars and lives. And I must say that I never saw so much lives in my life. All the local institutions are making lives and podcasts, and I think that is an effort of the association to support us because of all these threats that we are living and we talk about. And at the beginning of the crisis in March here in Brazil, the fear among the analysts was very strong because we thought that we will not have patients and that we will have very strong losses. And for lucky, with the electronic media, psychoanalysis could show its importance, offering a support not only to the candidates and to our patients, but also to the community. And this was of very great value. And after that we saw that we had a social function, an important social function, as well as therapeutic one. I think that the psychoanalyst and the psychiatrist calmed down. So that we could remain to work as psychoanalysts in the middle of the crisis.
I see. Very interesting indeed, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I also appreciate all the opportunity to talk with colleagues that IPA is providing and other organizations are providing, because we're all subject to very powerful emotional reactions. The exhaustion that's been mentioned, we tend to feel isolated in those feelings, and also I find myself having many good days, but some bad days too, where I'm sort of inexplicably down, feeling bad, morose or sad or lost or worried, and I think the idea that we can support each other. By the way, I'm living in a house with 4 psychotherapists, my wife and my daughter and her husband. So I get a fair amount of support from my small group, but I think that hearing that these feelings are so largely shared by all of us around the world is tremendously important as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, if you have suggestions or ways the IPA could even be more supportive, please tell us. Okay, let's go to the last part, the largest part, and that's the questions and answers. As I said before, the participants, everyone has now the questions and answer sheet in front, and on the right side there is this box, the question box. So please use that box if you have questions. Let's see if there are questions.
I see.
Yes, please.
I see one question. You don't see it?
No, I haven't got it here. Which one do you see? Please say it.
Should I read it?
Yes, please.
Should I read it?
Yes, please.
The pandemic situation challenges classic concepts like neutrality or the analytic frame, among others, but also tests the capacity to tolerate the differences and to deal with the otherness of what can be seen as the foreign in our patients, but also in ourselves. What do you think?
Who of you can react on it?
Gertrude.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, I worked since 2015 with refugees. Now it's not possible because of the pandemic. But I thought that we should, or the society should, feel more empathy and sympathy with the refugees, because somehow we have, not in the same extension, but we have the same fears. We don't know how the future is. We maybe we have no contact with our family. We fear about financial loss. We feel foreign in this situation, like they feel all the time. So I thought this should be more sympathy and empathy with them, but it's very difficult to let this into oneself, into the own soul. And therefore I think this question is very important. How can we tolerate differences, but also how can we feel ourselves like the foreigners feel all the time in our society?
Jay and Rogerio, do you want to react?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to think in this vertex that we are foreigners at this moment in a new field that we have to explore and to know, and we are experiencing all the uncertainty and all the helplessness that a foreigner feels when he arrives in a new and unknown region or country. And I think that all these feelings that we are living are forcing us in a very strong work of representation and elaboration. And as I said before, I think that the majority of our tiredness is due to this extra work that we are doing to explore this unknown region that we are forced to live.
I would like to say that I think that this question is tremendously important, because on the one hand, we can easily get trapped both in our sense of the shared experience and also in our belief that we have empathic capacities. But what I'm finding is that even with my patients, who constitute a relatively small sample people in society who are affected by the pandemic. It can be strain. It can be a strain to try to understand the experience of somebody, for instance, who is a younger single person who is trapped in a New York City apartment, cut off from social contact, cut off from hopes to be growing and establishing both relationships and professional possibilities. It's difficult to understand or to empathize, to fully understand the position of some older patients who are already struggling with depression and sense of their own decline, who feel that this really represents the end of their lives. And I have a couple of patients who are in that position as well, who, even though they might be around my age or a little older, are much less optimistic about their own futures than I typically and remain. So I think we are confronted with the otherness moment to moment in our work, and that doesn't for the moment touch the what I mentioned before, which is the kind of astonishing inequality, inequity with which this pandemic affects people in different social and economic and racial groups. So, so I think that we have to be kind of careful and humble about our belief that we can, in some way, transcend otherness and find empathic connections with people who are in very different circumstances than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, shall we go to the next question? I've got one here. The question is, when we speak about our feelings, we can symbolize it. Doesn't traumatic mean not being able to symbolize what happens?
Yes, I can begin to try to answer, because I have mentioned that in my presentation. And I think that all these feelings, very strong, that we are living with our patients, they are potentially traumatic, and we are doing an enormous effort to try to digest all these feelings, and at least theoretically we know that if these feelings cannot be digested very well, that means that cannot be symbolized very well, they can stay as an enormous unsymbolized emotion that will be splitted or evacuated in some form. And we know, for example, after the big traumatic events as the falling of the towers in New York in the 11th September, after that, and Jay can speak a lot about this to us, happened in New York a lot of post-traumatic situation with people that cannot sleep, people that have bad dreams, somatic symptoms, and the same, it's been observed already, as I have mentioned before, in Hebei or in some cities where the pandemic is weakened now. So a lot of people may present stress post-traumatic symptoms. So because of that, I think that our work as psychoanalysts and as psychologists, psychiatrists, has a very, very big importance. And all this big effort that all the societies are doing to open channels to speak with people, not only with our patients, is very important, to help people to speak about their experience, their anxieties, because as Jay and Gertrude said, this pandemic is being lived in very different forms, because there is people that is more comfortable, more protected, but there is a lot of people that are, especially in Brazil, totally exposed to the helplessness and to not having a good health service. And I will talk a little bit about this. Brazil is very big, is a continental country with very big differences. So perhaps we live, for example, we live here in the south of Brazil, where the conditions are quite good and the health attention is quite good. But in the north and in the northwest of Brazil, the conditions are terrible. So we are living in very good conditions here in the south, but suffering with the people that it's suffering in the north and in the northwest of Brazil. And I think that Jay mentioned this very well. We have to be empathic with all the suffering of these people.
Mm-hmm. Other remarks about this? Otherwise, I move to the next question. Yes, please, Gertrude.
I just have one question to Rogero. I think it's a theoretical question if the traumatic material can be symbolized or not. I think there are very different theories about it. Maybe you know more, but I think that somehow we are human and we have to symbolize everything. So
Yeah.
so this is, but this is these are different theories about traumatic material. So it's what he or she is asking, I cannot really answer.
Yeah, I also feel I can't answer it, and coming from a slightly different angle, which is that it seems like trauma is to describe this situation as traumatic is painting with much too broad a brush. It affects all of us in such different ways. I'm very very disinclined to compare a patient who is having night terrors, for instance, while at his country home, as suffering a traumatic reaction in comparison with people who are waiting for hours and hours on food lines because they can't feed their families. I think we have to be very careful and to feel our way into how we understand the dynamic effects of the experience, and not use what has always seemed to me to be a kind of gross concept like trauma. I mean, too broad a concept like trauma to try to explain things too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have another question here, which is overlapping partly what you have said already, but let's see. And the question is, I want to know if you worked with doctors, nurses, and other people on the moment of emergency in the COVID hospitals when the pandemic has been in your countries. What has been the focus of your work with them?
I haven't, so I can't really answer that.
Me too, I haven't too. I haven't.
I only know from two initiatives. I was not in these initiatives who made an extra telephone for these people. And I heard that in the first time when it was higher in Germany, it was not so much used because these nurses and doctors, they had no time left for this, and but it was not so dramatic in Germany in the hospitals. So maybe after the first months, this is now maybe there is more time and to speak about what they really experienced. But in the other countries like Italy, I think there are a lot of colleagues who worked with them, where it was very, very hard and very dramatic in the hospitals.
Well, I heard the same from colleagues that were in systems that offered attention and possibility to talk either by phone or whatever. And they said the same, that there was made very little use of it. And they discovered that, you know, in those emergency situations, in the situation itself, there is little need for support because everyone is very, very busy and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, such an emergency situation, when I remember them, that are situations in which you deny the psychological impact. You just work and you are nice to the patients, etc., but you do not pay too much attention on all the terrible things you see or are doing, etc., etc. And so maybe it's wrong to want to support those workers immediately at the spot and during the emergency, but as you are saying already, maybe we should offer it much more a little bit afterwards, because then they get into trouble, not in the emergency itself.
Yeah, of course, 9/11 was quite a different thing, but I had that experience that several people got in touch with me shortly after 9/11 to deal with the aftermath of it. And I would expect that that will happen now as well.
Okay, let's go to the next question. What are your observations of the process of child psychotherapy? How is the COVID-19 crisis and the remote therapy affecting the children? Gertrude, do you have?
Yeah.
No, I'm not a child psychoanalyst, but in the whole society, there's a lot of attention what the children are experiencing now. And I miss really, and this is therefore a very good question, because I miss really that that the children are asked themselves how they feel. That we ask the children, and this is the most important, and not to say what is difficult for them or not. So I think they can adapt much better than we. But on the other hand, there's so much theory what they need, and I think it would be better to ask the children themselves, and also the child analysts. I know that the child psychiatrists and analysts are not working remote. They are working in the present with the children. They cannot do it. But I don't know. This is my experience from my colleagues. Only with the elder children you can phone or Skype, but not with the small children. They have to be in their practice. This is a very big challenge for them.
At this moment, I have no children in analysis or in therapy, but I have heard that some colleagues that works with older children, that they are trying to maintain the therapy or the analysis in some way. And there are very interesting reports that the child takes the phone, close the door, ask to the parents to not enter into the room, and they show the room to the analyst or the therapist, and they show the drawing they are doing, and they told histories to the analyst or to the therapist. I can speak a little bit about the therapy or analysis with adolescents, because they are suffering a lot too with the isolation. They cannot have a lot of experience. Very important to them to meet their colleagues, their peers, their friends, and having experience. It's very interesting because to maintain the free-floating attention and the state of mind of session is very hard, because even with the isolation, the adolescents, they act a lot into the session. So they have their phone or their computer, and they took it around all the house, and they show you the house, and they show the games they are playing, and they shows the guitar that they are playing too. So it's also an effort to maintain the analysis, but the language of the adolescents involves really a lot of action, and this requires from us also more effort to try to understand what is happening with them.
I don't work with children, but in addition to living with 3 other therapists, I'm living with 2 toddlers. And so I've had a chance to observe their reactions, and they all, it's very palpable and very wrenching to see them experiencing the loss of their world as they knew it. Even though they're with their parents, they're with people who love them, they've lost their friends, they've lost their routines, they've lost their social contacts, and you try as much as possible to make up for what they've lost, but the sense of a loss that's going to register in their lives in ways it's hard to predict is very, very palpable and very moving.
There's time for another question, which is, have you all seen a greater amount of denial of the dangers of reality?
I haven't, and I think that's probably because the people I work with live in New York City, where there's been a very vigorous attempt to keep the presence of danger in the public eye, and where people have been very mindful. So my own sense is that there isn't the denial. I see it on the news. I see it certainly as Ruggiero does. I mean, we are in a very similar position to where you are in terms of the horrific irresponsibility of our national leadership. But I think in New York City in particular, both because it's been so hard hit by the pandemic, and also because we've had pretty vigorous leadership in terms of creating appropriate measures, that people are taking this very seriously. So that when I see on the news the way people are congregating on beaches in other states, or going to large religious gatherings, or having parties that seem to flaunt the seriousness of the virus, it's speaking of otherness that we were talking about a moment ago. It's a very hard thing for me to really connect with, like, what are these people thinking, because everybody I work with and everybody I know is taking it so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I have the same experience, Jay. The people who I work with, it's taking it very seriously, and very no denying about the dangers of reality. But as you said, our federal leadership is very close to yours, and there is, I don't know how to say in English, a negationist vision, anti-science vision totally, and denying all the dangers and all the death we are having here. We are having here almost 26,000 people that have already died, and we are in the middle of the pandemic, and our federal leadership don't say one word of compassion or of solidarity with these families, and he's only worried with his re-election in 2022. So this creates a part of the Brazilian population is denying totally the dangers of the reality influenced by this kind of thinking.
Yes, please.
I have one question. What could we do to demask, as I said, to demask this conspiracy thinking and this denial? I mean, would be a very important question for us analysts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our associations, for example, FEBRAPSI is a federal association of the Brazilian psychoanalysts, has launched yesterday a strong manifest against this negationist attitude of the federal government, and also all the threats for democracy in Brazil at this moment. So the psychoanalysts have launched a manifest against this federal policy. And all the psychoanalytical association, the component society have signed and have supported this manifest.
Thank you very much. You know, we have to stop in a few minutes because the time is limited. We are thrown out if we do not stop in time. And that is very complicated if that's done. So we are trying to keep to the final time indeed. Well, you know, this has been very, very interesting. It's said that we cannot answer or go into all the other questions that there are, because, as I said, our time is over. First, you panelists, thank you very much for doing all this work. It has been a very nice discussion, and we certainly will continue the discussion in other seminars and in other occasions. Thank you very much. Thank you also, staff members, for organizing this, because it is very complex to organize this in the right way, and you are always doing a very good job on the side. Before stopping, there are a few items we should let pass. There is now a sheet on the website. If you want to have more information, please go to this part of our website with all that information that is shown there. Then the next slide is about our Congress. This is mentioned already by Gertrude. We are still organizing this Congress, and we are aware of the fact that we might have to organize this completely different from usual, because we don't have the faintest idea indeed what the crisis and then also the economical crisis will do to the participation. We're working on it, but you know, things are fake, so we can't give any clear answer at the moment. The last item I want to draw your attention to is our next seminar. That's about being parents in time of the COVID crisis. But I have to warn you that this webinar is in Spanish. Okay, let me say something to really finish. You know, some of us say that the pandemic is mortal to psychoanalysis. Others are stating that psychoanalysis is more needed than ever. Well, I hope that today's seminar has shifted your opinion a bit towards the second opinion. Well, do have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.